Let me take you back to the day my life changed forever. It wasn't just any ordinary Monday. It was the day I realized that no matter how hard I tried, some people will never see your worth if they don't want to. At 31 years old, I had already spent nearly 3 years working unpaid at my family's construction company after graduating top of my class from UCLA with a degree in civil engineering. You'd think earning honors and dedicating myself to every project would earn me respect, but instead, it felt like I was invisible, a ghost wandering through boardrooms where my voice didn't matter. That morning, I walked into what would become my final strategy meeting with hope still clinging to my chest. Hope that maybe this time, things would be different. Maybe this time, my father would listen. The room was tense as Nathan, my younger brother, presented his latest proposal, a luxury resort development in Red Rock. It was flashy, unsustainable, and completely disconnected from reality. As he spoke, my stomach churned. His numbers were inflated, his environmental plans non-existent, and yet everyone nodded along as though he'd just unveiled the eighth wonder of the world. When Nathan got to the section on building materials, something inside me snapped. Still using red sand-mixed concrete from Arizona? I asked sharply, and what about the wastewater treatment system? I don't see it in the plans. Nathan shrugged, unfazed, resting his chin on his hand like I was interrupting his masterpiece. The town's main plant handles it, he said dismissively. What's the problem? The problem, I shot back, my voice rising, is that the plant's been over capacity since last year. If Jenkins, the building inspector, finds out, they'll shut this thing down before we even break ground. My father leaned forward then, his eyes narrowing at me like I was a bug he wanted to squash. Are you saying Nathan doesn't know what he's doing? His tone dripped with contempt, each word slicing deeper into the silence of the room. My heart pounded as I swallowed hard and replied, No, I'm saying he didn't do a thorough check. And if we move forward like this, we'll get sued and lose everything. Nathan laughed, a soft, condescending laugh meant to humiliate me, and added, Typical Julian, always waiting for a chance to tear someone else down. My fists clenched under the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not tearing anyone down, I said firmly. I'm trying to keep this company from going bankrupt over a plan that reads like a kid playing with Legos. The air grew heavy, suffocating. Then came the words that cut deeper than anything else. We need builders, not Boy Scouts. You don't belong here. My father's voice was cold, final, like a verdict handed down by a judge who'd already made up his mind. I stood there for a moment, stunned, not because I hadn't expected cruelty, but because it was delivered so casually, so publicly, in front of everyone who mattered. As I left the room, something inside me broke. But the worst part? Later that evening, while packing up my things, I discovered an email buried in my inbox. It was dated months ago, an official notice confirming that my shares in the company had been quietly transferred to Nathan without my knowledge. Just like that, I was erased, not just from the meeting, but from the very foundation of the business I'd poured my soul into. The day I drove away from my family's house with $20,000 in my account and a suitcase full of broken dreams, I didn't know where I was headed. All I knew was that I needed to escape, to find a place far enough to silence the voices of doubt echoing in my head. 2 days later, I stumbled into a small town on the edge of Oregon, its quiet roads lined with leaves and shadowed by towering pines. It felt like stepping into another world, one untouched by skyscrapers or boardroom politics. And when I saw that old wooden shed tucked behind Ron's weathered house, something inside me clicked. This could be it, I thought. A fresh start. But starting over wasn't as romantic as it sounded. The shed didn't belong to me. It belonged to Ron, a retired carpenter who used to build desks and chairs for local schools. When I asked if I could rent it, he simply said, Go ahead. That place could use someone to breathe life back into it. His words carried no judgment, no expectation, just quiet permission. For someone like me, who had just been stripped of everything, it felt oddly fitting. The shed was barely standing, its roof leaking, floors uneven, walls rotting. Still, I threw myself into fixing it, tearing out rotten beams, patching holes, rewiring electricity with tools so outdated they felt like relics from another century. Nights were the hardest. The cold seeped through every crack, biting at my skin while doubts gnawed at my mind. Was this all worth it? Could I really build something meaningful from nothing? Then came the storm, a brutal reminder of how fragile my new beginning truly was. One freezing night, winds howled like wolves, shaking the shed until it groaned under the pressure. By morning, half the roof had caved in, and rainwater pooled across the floor. Standing there amidst the wreckage, I felt defeated. My hands trembled, not just from the cold, but from fear. Fear that maybe my father was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. I called the bank the next day, hoping to secure a loan to keep things afloat. But their response hit me like a punch to the gut. Your current funds aren't sufficient collateral. Translation? You're broke, Julian. Broke and alone. That evening, sitting in my car, the same one Dad had bought me years ago, I stared at the steering wheel, weighing my options. Selling the car would crush me. It was the last tangible piece of my past life. Yet, keeping it meant giving up on Green Nest before it even began. In the end, I walked into the dealership, swallowing my pride along with the lump in my throat. As I handed over the keys, the salesman asked casually, "Are you sure about this?" I nodded, forcing a smile. What choice did I have? Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, an old colleague from my father's company showed up unannounced. His name was Marcus, and he brought promises wrapped in honeyed words. "Your dad regrets what happened," he said. "He wants you back. He'll apologize publicly, give you your position back. It's a win-win." For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. But then Marcus mentioned something offhand. "Of course, merging Green Nest with Carter Construction makes sense. Your dad's lawyers are already drafting the paperwork." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about control. My father hadn't changed. He just wanted Green Nest, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own. That night, I sat in the repaired shed, staring at the blueprint sketches scattered across my makeshift desk. Every line represented hours of work, sleepless nights, and sacrifices I couldn't undo. Letting him take Green Nest would mean losing more than a business. It would mean losing myself. So I made a decision. I told Marcus to leave and never come back. If surviving storms, selling my car, and facing failure taught me anything, it was this: freedom isn't free. Sometimes, holding on means letting go of everything and everyone that tries to pull you down. The Millers project was more than just my first client. It was proof that Green Nest could make a difference. When they walked into my workshop, carrying a hand-drawn sketch of their dream home from 1988, I saw something in their eyes: hope. They weren't looking for luxury or grandeur. They wanted a simple place where sunlight would stream into the kitchen and cold drafts wouldn't seep through cracks in the doorframe. Their budget was tight, but their vision was clear. For 3 months, I poured everything I had into designing and building their house, choosing locally sourced timber, installing energy-efficient windows, and ensuring every detail aligned with their needs. When it was finished, Mrs. Miller stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face as she gazed at the small window overlooking her flower garden. That moment wasn't just validation for me. It was confirmation that what I was doing mattered. Word spread quickly after that. Neighbors drove by, curious about the modest yet inviting structure tucked among the trees. Within weeks, 2 more families reached out, asking if I could design homes like the Millers. Each project brought new challenges, but also new lessons. From sourcing sustainable materials to finding creative solutions for limited budgets, every step reinforced why I started Green Nest: to give people a chance to live fully, no matter their circumstances. The Millers didn't just launch my career, they reminded me why I chose this path in the first place. But success has a way of attracting attention you don't always want. A month later, I received an email from a large Seattle-based firm offering a partnership deal worth $1 million. At first glance, it seemed like the answer to every problem I didn't know how to solve: cash flow issues, limited staff, outdated tools. But there was a catch. They wanted 50% of Green Nest shares. The CEO, Mr. Langston, phrased it delicately during our meeting. "We're not here to take over, Julian. We're here to elevate what you've started." His polished smile and tailored suit screamed confidence, but his eyes betrayed something else: a hunger for control. I refused, knowing deep down that selling even half of Green Nest would mean losing the very soul of what I'd built. But saying no came with consequences. Our finances were already stretched thin. The projects we took on barely covered operational costs. That night, sitting alone in the workshop surrounded by blueprints and sketches, I questioned everything. What if I had made a mistake? Was my pride keeping me from securing Green Nest's future? Then came the phone call from Ron, the retired carpenter who'd once rented me his shed. He said simply, "Sometimes holding on means letting go of fear, son. You've already proven you can build without them." His words reminded me of why I left my family's company, to create something authentic, something mine. Still, the weight of rejection lingered. Memories of my father's contemptuous gaze and Nathan's smug laughter haunted me whenever doubt crept in. Green Nest eventually grew into an internationally recognized name, but those early days taught me resilience. Every late-night design session, every handshake with a grateful client, reinforced the belief that freedom isn't free, it demands sacrifice. And though I couldn't forget the pain of being cast aside, I learned to carry it not as a wound, but as armor. 4 months ago, on a quiet Friday afternoon, my phone rang as I was leaving the studio. The name flashing on the screen froze me in place, Mom. It had been 5 years since I last heard from her. My hand tightened around the car keys, still dangling in the lock. For a moment, I considered ignoring the call. But something, a mix of curiosity and lingering hope, made me answer. Her voice trembled slightly when she said, "Julian, it's Mom. Your father, he had a stroke last week. He's in the ICU now." She paused, then added with urgency, "Nathan's out of options. They're getting ready to sue the company for breach of contract. The lawyers are threatening to seize assets if we can't pay in time." Her words hit me like a freight train, not because of the desperation in her tone, but because of what came next. "Can you help? Just for a while. I don't know who else to turn to." The next morning, I stood outside the ICU window, gripping a coffee cup so tightly my knuckles turned white. Inside, my father lay motionless, half his face darkened by the aftermath of the stroke. I didn't go in. Instead, I stood there, staring through the glass, feeling like a stranger looking at someone I used to know. A few minutes later, my mother appeared, clutching a thick folder. Her coat was thin, her face lined with exhaustion, but her eyes carried that same familiar urgency, the kind that always demanded sacrifice for the sake of the family. She handed me the folder without a preamble. "They need someone to co-sign the loan, just temporarily. Once things settle, I'll sort it out," she said firmly. I flipped through the pages mechanically. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then I reached the collateral section, Green Nest Studio. My breath hitched. The collateral wasn't the family home, not the cars or land, not even shares from the company I once worked for. It was Green Nest, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own. I looked up sharply, meeting her gaze. "Green Nest is the collateral for a $2 million loan." My voice was low, clipped, each word cutting through the silence like a blade. Before she could respond, Nathan walked up behind her. His tone was calm, almost dismissive, as though explaining something obvious. "It's just a temporary guarantee. As long as your name's on it, the bank will approve faster. Once things stabilize, you can pull out. No one's touching Green Nest." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound that startled even myself. Turning to Nathan, I stared at him down until he shifted uncomfortably. "You think I'm stupid enough to co-sign a $2 million loan for the same company you've been running into the ground for years?" My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. Nathan froze, but my mother stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Don't let me finish," I snapped, cutting her off. Pointing at the folder, I demanded, "Where's the house? The cars? The land? What about the family company's shares? Why isn't any of that being offered up?" At that, my mother glanced sideways at Nathan. He looked away, shoulders hunched, like a child caught lying. In that instant, I knew the truth. "Tell me," I said, my voice quieter but sharper. "They're gone, aren't they? Sold, mortgaged, tied up in lawsuits. There's nothing left to put on the table." My mother swallowed hard, unable to deny it. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of their betrayal sink in. "You didn't come to me out of love," I said finally. "You came because you needed a shield, to save the same company that threw me out with nothing but silence." With that, I shoved the folder back into her hands and walked away, leaving them standing there, stunned and speechless. The moment I walked out of the hospital, leaving my mother and Nathan standing there with that folder trembling in their hands, I knew it wasn't just a decision. It was a declaration. A declaration that Green Nest wasn't up for grabs, not even for blood ties or guilt trips. For years, I had carried the weight of being treated as expendable, as someone who didn't matter unless they could fix what others broke. Now, standing outside under the cold gray sky, I felt something new, freedom. But freedom has its price. Days turned into weeks, and silence settled between us like an invisible wall. Then came the letter, a formal notice from my father's lawyers accusing me of abandoning familial obligations and demanding compensation for damaging the company's reputation. The words burned on the page, each sentence dripping with accusation. Your refusal to assist during this critical time reflects negligence toward your family legacy. They wanted $500,000, money I didn't have and wouldn't give, even if I did. That night, sleep evaded me. I sat alone at my desk, staring at the blueprint of a small home I'd designed months ago. Its simplicity mocked me. How easy it was to build shelter for others, but how impossible it felt to shield myself from the ghosts of my past. Was I too harsh? Should I have signed the loan, swallowed my pride, and let them take Green Nest if things went south? My mind raced with doubts, replaying every argument, every dismissal, every silent dinner where no one asked about my dreams. Yet, deep down, I knew agreeing would have meant losing everything I worked for, not just financially, but spiritually. Green Nest wasn't just a company. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Months passed, and then the call came, the one I never expected. My father had passed away. His will included a single line addressed to me. To Julian, you chose your path. Prove it right. Those 10 words hit harder than any insult ever had. It wasn't an apology, nor was it forgiveness. It was a challenge, a dare wrapped in thinly veiled acknowledgement. He hadn't changed, not really. Even in death, he couldn't resist testing me, pushing me to prove him wrong. I spent days pacing around the workshop, unable to focus on anything else. Part of me wanted to hate him, to scream at the unfairness of it all. Another part wondered if he secretly hoped I'd succeed despite his disdain. What kind of man leaves such a loaded message to his son? A proud man, a stubborn man, maybe even a broken man who never learned how to love openly. Eventually, I returned to work, forcing myself to move forward. I poured my frustration into a project I'd been delaying. A community center in rural Montana built entirely from reclaimed materials. Every hammer strike echoed my anger. Every nail drove deeper the resolve to keep Green Nest independent. If my father wanted proof, I'd give it to him, not because I owed him, but because I owed it to myself. The Berlin conference was supposed to be the culmination of everything I had worked for, a chance to showcase Green Nest on a global stage. I brought with me a model home, small but intricate, built entirely from reclaimed wood. It wasn't flashy or overly designed. Instead, it was simple and functional, like a quiet rebellion against the excesses of modern architecture. I called it the unbought house, a symbol of a life that couldn't be purchased, no matter how much wealth or power one possessed. As I stood there explaining its features, the recycled materials, the solar panels integrated into the roof, the rainwater catchment system, I felt a sense of pride. This wasn't just a house. It was proof that freedom could be built, piece by piece. But not everyone saw it that way. After my presentation, during the QA session, a journalist in the front row raised his hand. His tone was sharp, almost accusatory. "Mr. Carter," he began, leaning forward slightly as if to emphasize his point. "Do you ever feel guilty about turning your back on your family? About refusing to help them when they needed you most?" The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, waiting for my response. For a moment, I hesitated not because I doubted myself, but because I knew this question carried weight. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been labeled selfish for choosing themselves over obligation. I took a deep breath before answering, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "Yes," I admitted, meeting his gaze head-on. "There are moments when I wonder if I made the right choice. But here's what I've learned. Saying no isn't always easy, and it doesn't always make you popular. Sometimes, though, it's the only way to protect what you believe in." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then I added, softer this time, "I didn't walk away because I hated my family. I walked away because staying would have meant losing myself." As I stepped off the stage, applause rippled through the audience, but my mind was elsewhere. Memories flooded back, the sting of my father's words, The betrayal I felt when I realized they only reached out for my signature, not my presence. Yet, amidst the pain, there was clarity. That night, sitting alone in my hotel room overlooking Berlin's skyline, I replayed the journalist's question in my head. Was I wrong to say no? Maybe. But guilt wasn't going to bring me peace. What mattered now was moving forward, not for them, but for me. Back home, life returned to its rhythm. I continued teaching young architects, designing homes for people who truly needed shelter, and mentoring students eager to learn about sustainable living. Green Nest remained independent, untouched by outside control. Every morning, as I walked through the workshop, I reminded myself why I started this journey. Freedom, I realized, wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever. It required constant vigilance, constant effort. Letting someone else take the reins, even under the guise of helping, would mean risking everything I'd fought so hard to build. Before ending my story, I want to leave you with one final thought. If you've ever been where I was, treated as expendable, dismissed as unnecessary, only to be called back when convenient, ask yourself this: what is worth holding on to? Is it pride? Is it values? Or is it simply the courage to choose yourself when no one else does? I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. Pride won't feed you, but it will keep you standing. And sometimes, standing tall is the hardest thing we'll ever do. So, I ask you, the listener, was I wrong to refuse my family when they needed me most? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonates with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening. Until next time.